Okay, we have according to the belt, a model year 2001 Toyota Noah with a 1AZ FSE engine, and it has a rather long story, but it was towed in um, by the customer from another garage. The complaint with it, I think, when it went in, was it couldn't. It had erratic engine speeds, so they did mechanical valve timing on it. That didn't seem to have worked. So eventually, the customer was advised to buy a new engine, which he has done, and the vehicle was towed here. And the engine has been installed. And what we are going to do now, I've been told when the key is turned on, I've actually seen for myself. So when the key is turned on, what happens is the injectors keep firing. Remember, this is a direct injection. It has a direct injection type of fueling system. In other words, the engine computer commands an injector driver unit to fire the injectors. Now, as soon as the key is turned on in the ignition, like that, as soon as that happens, you have, that's Musa putting his tools on the vehicle, you have the injectors firing all the time at very high speeds in what seemed like an uncontrolled manner. Sorry, I got interrupted by a phone call, but as soon as the key is in that position and you can see the check engine light, what happens is the injectors all go off in an uncontrolled manner. So what I did was to come to the diagnostic computer and try to use and try to get into the engine control module. Oh, I turned the key off. Sorry about that, my bad. Reason why I keep turning the key off is I don't want the injectors to overheat because they keep running all the time. When you come to read the codes, there is only one code, I think, for the intake air temperature sensor, which hasn't been connected yet. But that shouldn't be, one, the source of our problem, and two, shouldn't stop the engine from cranking and running. Well, there are now more codes because at some point I decided to disconnect the injector driver unit. But if I decide to erase all these codes, I actually had a point where I didn't have a single code on the vehicle. I don't know if you can see that. There's probably a lot of glare from the screen on the diagnostic machine, but I've done that. If I go back to read the codes, I have only one code for the intake air temperature, and that's disconnected for the reason that I just gave you a while back. So my next step was, because obviously if the injectors have been firing for a while, even if for just several seconds continuously without the engine running or cranking, the cylinders would be flooded. So our next step was to take the the plugs out, the coils and the plugs out, because this engine has a coil on plug system. We took the plugs out and tried to crank the engine without the plugs in it, just so that we could get rid of the fuel flooding in the cylinders. And that's why when I try to crank, all you hear is just a whine, like a grinding machine, instead of the usual cranking sound you'd hear. So we try to empty the engine cylinders of fuel. Now the next step was coming here to the injector driver unit, and onto these wires. There's a set of 5 wires here. There's a set of 5 wires here. Now 4 of the wires are coming from the engine control module. This is the injector driver unit. It's actually feeling very hot. I'm going to turn the ignition key off again. It's feeling very hot because it's working all the time. It's been working all the time. Now my plan was, because on 4 of these 5 wires, the injector driver unit gets instructions from the engine control module to fire the injectors. Now there's something else I forgot to show you, but first of all, when I turned the key in the crank position with the plugs missing and the engine was spinning, being spun by the starter motor, I got a reading for the RPM. So that tells me the crank position sensor is working, and only when I push the key in the crank position did I get that RPM signal. So the problem is not the sensor, the crank sensor lying to the engine computer about the engine running, and therefore firing getting the computer to fire the injectors. So now my suspicion was at that point that either the engine control module was commanding the injector driver unit to fire the injectors even without the crank signal, the crank position sensor signal, or the injector driver module was at fault. So my next step was to put my portable oscilloscope onto these wires to see if any instructions from the engine control module coming to the driver through the injector driver unit. And yeah, that's plugged in, so I'm going to put the key in the on position again. Like that. And I think you can see the activity on my oscilloscope. There's activity on those signal lines from the engine control module to the injector driver unit on almost all the wires, and I don't know if you can hear it. The injectors are whining behind there. I don't know if you can hear them. They are going off like crickets. The injectors are really going off like crickets, and I want to do this very quickly because I've disabled the fuel from the fuel tank, just so that the fuel doesn't get into the cylinders, because the injectors are still connected up. And all I can see is signals. That's basically all I needed. I think this is a bad engine control module. We need this guy, the injector driver unit, is okay. He's getting instructions from wrong instructions to fire from the engine control module. We will need a new engine control module for this car.